I heard the most interesting two words put together into one word I've ever heard in my life. Blockchain. Then you made it even better by saying another wonderful word, startup. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere regret to announce that this will be the last podcast of Mario Rosario. He will be leaving us very soon.
That's what P&G hires for. They believe in making leadership right from the get-go. They believe everybody is a leader.
I don't think I've known a single woman who's worked in environment.
Yeah, we are very rare. Even in my division, I think there were some 105 guys and I was the only woman. I actually used to travel in a helicopter to work, but I had to come back also daily. So 7 days, that was my Uber, you know.
Do I need help?
So there is this thing in psychology where they say if something's not broken, you don't need to fix it. So I always knew that if I want to start a company of my own, it has to be something that I'm really passionate about so that I could stick to it for 10, 20, whatever years.
Pineapple Podcast episode number 6. Our guest for today, Rucha. When was the last time you heard of a woman who worked on an offshore oil rig? Never? Well, I had never either. You are about to be surprised by the guest we bring on show today. An ex-IITian who's worked in multinational companies, dabbled in a little bit of fintech, even crossed over to blockchain, and now has her own startup. For Rucha, it seems like the journey is just about to begin. I'm super excited to have all of you on show today. Can't wait to get started.
Welcome to another episode of the Pineapple Podcast. We have with us today a surprise. Today, I'm not going to do the introductions because the person we brought on is going to talk about a topic which Mario the Legend loves. Mario, who do we have on our topic today? We have Rucha Walawalkar sitting with us.
All dressed.
That is so
I think I enunciated it properly. I'm quite sure I got it right, didn't I, Rucha?
No. It's Walawalkar.
Walawalkar, but I was almost there.
Say it again. Walawalkar. Why are you pausing after
I'm not pausing.
It's better.
It's much better. Thank you. Welcome to the Pineapple Posts. Ignore that person sitting over there.
Ignore? What is ignore? Jesus. What a start to the podcast.
Yeah, really. So, Rucha, how do you feel? Is this your first? Have you done podcasts before? Or is this your first?
I've just listened to a lot of them, but I've not done.
You know why she's laughing? Because you feel like somebody who's on a red carpet hosting an. How do you feel? Will this movie do that? What does this crap? Stop.
Okay.
I will do the. This is why I do the introductions.
It's
Rucha,
cool.
No.
I like laughing.
Back off. This is where you back off.
Go.
Okay, Rucha, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey until
Hey, Bhagwan.
this point.
I feel like a job interview. That's what I'm
Tell me
going
about
to say.
yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let me tell you why we invited you here today.
Okay.
When we got together for lunch the other day, I heard the most interesting two words put together into one word I've ever heard in my life. Blockchain. Then you made it even better by saying another wonderful word, startup. And I immediately realized that somebody on my panel is going to be super happy to know you. Now, let's start with the absolute basics. What is blockchain?
Okay, so think of it this way. Today, our internet consists of centralized systems. What that means is today, if a government decides that I want to shut off a particular infrastructure, they can do that. Or if a big company decides I want to shut off the infrastructure in this area, they can do that. Blockchains are supposed to be a decentralized ecosystem. What that means is, let's say there are 1,000 computers and 1,000 computers are basically running together to run a chain or infrastructure. Only when majority of the 1,000 computers agree on it, only then decisions can be made. So that's like a very simple explanation
of a network?
Yes. So no one entity can decide what is going to happen on this infrastructure. Only if a majority of the 1,000 agree, that's what's going to happen. So let's say, as an example, 1,000 different companies are running a blockchain. Only if, say, 700, 800 companies decide that this network needs to shut, only then it will happen. Which is much better than today's systems where only one company can decide what happens. Another example is, in banking. If somebody wants to seize your assets, if a bank wants to seize your assets, they can do that. But let's say there was a consortium of 50 banks working together, then majority of the banks had to kind of put a vote that we want to censor his account, only then it would be done.
Did you notice how excited we got? While you were talking, we both were like, so this is what's going to happen already. Go ahead.
So, like what you said, right? There's a whole bunch of companies who are in this chain, and they need to give consensus, right, for whatever to happen, a transaction or something. So, is this consensus done by the software? Is this automatic, or is there a person sitting behind the screen who's like saying, okay, I'm fine with this, check, go ahead? Is it automatic? Is it manual, or is it automatic?
It's automatic. So the idea was to take away people from the system, and algorithms or code can decide how that happens. I'll give example of two consensus systems. One is called proof of work. So think of it as computers are trying to crack a code, and whoever cracks the code first mines the block first, right? So that is a proof of work algorithm where multiple computers have to do specific heavy work to make sure that the blockchain is running. Then the other one is called proof of stake. So where you stake something, like I have to stake money in the form of cryptocurrency, and when many of these nodes stake their cryptocurrency, only then you get access to that democracy of sorts. And then you can form a consensus. If any bad actor comes into the play, then your stake is taken off. So let's say I had put in 20 bitcoins to make sure that I get access as a democratic citizen. Then if I do something wrong, the 20 bitcoins can go away, which is why I am incentivized to be the right person in that ecosystem. But it is all automated via code.
So for the proof of work, since you're all trying to crack a code, right? So everybody's got interest in keeping the system running, right?
Yes.
So that seems to work. But in proof of stake, like you said, the bigger the stake you have, does it mean you have more influence on which transactions get processed? I'm thinking from a very capitalistic way, because if I have a startup, I put more stake, I have more control. So for the consensus where there's proof of stake, let's say you have like the 10 players in the system, and one of them is IMF, one is the World Bank, the other one's a small bank in some village, right? So does this mean that the bigger giants who put more stake get to have more control on the blockchain? So then how fair is this?
So think of it this way, let's say there are 10 computers running, and if you're very rich, you might be able to run 8 of them, right? Because you're a big player, and small players might be running the other 2. But what that means is, if you try to have too much control on the system, see, you've put a stake in, right? Maybe you've put $8 billion versus the others who have put $2 billion. If people feel that you're controlling that ecosystem and they don't want to be on that blockchain, they will leave, right? So you're going to lose the value of the 8 billion that you put in.
Okay.
And once people stop using the blockchain, then you have lost your own money. So even though somebody might have control over that blockchain, they are still incentivized to do good work. Okay. So you might have heard of things like FTX and Tron that didn't work out. In that case, when people realize that something shady is happening, we don't want to continue, they left that blockchain ecosystem. What that meant is the price came crashing down.
But then when that happens, you'll have to convert from whatever token they were using on that chain out into physical money. And at that point of time, that conversion, it's going to be a little confusing, right? Because when people start to leave, the value of
crypto is going to fall down.
It's going to fall, or the currency is going to fall, the token is going to fall.
Yes.
So they may not really get that much back.
Exactly. So then you are not incentivized to do bad acting if you're running a blockchain. Okay. So let's say you're a big, say, World Bank, and you have invested billions of dollars to run the blockchain, but then you do bad actors, you censor a lot of information on that chain. People decide to just stop using you. Let's say they decide, okay, let's go to Ethereum or Bitcoin. What that will essentially mean is the $8 billion that you put up, they're going to fall in price, they could fall overnight, and then you've lost your own money. Yeah.
So you worked in a blockchain enterprise for some time.
Yes.
Can you tell us your experience, if you're allowed to, and how it went, and what exactly were you creating?
What's the name of the enterprise first?
It's called Polygon Labs. I used to work. It's a level 2 blockchain. What that means is it sits on top of Ethereum, and we help scale Ethereum. I joined in the founder's office. When I was looking for blockchain roles, I was interested in 2 types of companies. One is protocol companies which are building this infrastructure, and the second was exchanges, like Coinbase and CoinDCX in India was Xerex. So I was interviewing in these places, and I was fortunate enough to get into Polygon Labs. My idea was if I work in a protocol level company, I'll get to see the breadth of it as well as some verticals, right? Because there are some applications that are built on blockchain, they are very specific to a use case. But when you work on protocol level, you get to see the whole ecosystem at play. So you get to see what applications are building on it, what are the infrastructure players, what are the consensus mechanisms, what are the products coming in. And that is what fascinated me about this domain. I believed that it was a new cutting edge technology that's happening in the world, right? As good as internet was back then. And I wanted to be a part of it. So that's how I had decided to get into it. In Polygon, I started off in the founder's office, so I got to see a lot of strategy, the different business development that's happening, the products that they were coming up with, the R&D that was happening. And I'm an engineer officially I'm an engineer, so I was really interested on the engineering aspect. So a lot of projects that I picked up had to do with the new product launches that we were doing, the different architectural decisions that were happening. That's what fascinated me. So I started picking up more on the engineering projects, and I also then moved to the engineering team. And over there I handled 2 products primarily, and that was my major journey in Polygon.
Did you work in any other tech and IT before joining this company?
I had worked in a fintech company, so it was a technology company, but in the Web 2 space.
Okay, so this is the impression I have. Maybe you can correct it. There's a lot of other tech out there. There's AI, there's there's DevOps, there's a whole bunch of web applications, and then there's blockchain. Now, what I've seen, blockchain kind of stands apart, right? Because in this space, if I'm working in AI, if I'm building an app, I need to make it web. I need to expose it to web. So, what I see in the general IT space, even if you're working in generative AI, right? You're still connected to the entire web ecosystem because your apps need to. But blockchain is kind of separate. When you go into a blockchain company, you use jargon which you don't use elsewhere. Right? Chains and then protocols, L1, L2. It's very different. I mean, do you feel that when you jumped into this company, although you were working tech, you were not really connected with the other tech which is happening out there?
Yeah, that's right. So think of it this way, right? Even in AI, there's a lot of jargon, right? You have to know about LLMs, and you have to know about transformers, you have to know about AI. So any tech field that you get into, you have to know these jargons, and you learn them on the job. Let's say I wanted to get into robotics, I would have to learn jargon that has to do with hardware. Similarly, in blockchain, I knew the basics of it. I knew conceptually what blockchains are trying to do. I knew a bit about the applications, about Bitcoin, Ethereum. But the rest I had to learn on the job. So once you get into these companies, the jargons become part of your life and it becomes easier. But at the same time, like you mentioned DevOps, right? DevOps is a big part of infrastructure, because finally blockchains are still running the same on AWS, on GCP or Azure cloud. Yeah. They are decentralized, but the infrastructure still remains the same. So there was a DevOps team even in Polygon. Just think about it this way, that instead of a centralized infra, the DevOps team has to be good at decentralized infra. It's the same with web applications, right? You see a lot of normal websites being made. We still have the same UI UX as any other Web 2 company. The difference only happens on the application level and on the protocol level, how you're interacting with the internet, so to speak. So today, for example, if I'm interacting with the old internet, right, there are a few avenues in which I can change or write to it, read from it.
What's old internet?
Web 2,
okay.
Which is not decentralized. So if I'm interacting with Web 2, there are certain rules on how you interact with it, right? People call the internet even before that Web 1, where you could only read.
Okay.
Then you learn to write to it. Similarly, in blockchains, it's like Web 3, where you can even create your own rules on how a particular network should run. So that I learned on the job. So it's not very, very different from the current tech. It's just the concepts. You have to change the way you think about the internet changes when you work in a blockchain. Not just internet, the way you think about money also changes when you work in the blockchain ecosystem.
So if somebody wants to get into a blockchain company, I'll tell you where I'm coming from. How easy is it? Because today, if somebody wants to break into AI, it is lethal because there's so much stuff which they expect you to already know. There's so much code out there on Kaggle. It's easy to learn AI today because there's so much code out there, and so the bar of hiring people has gone up because you're expected to know so much in AI and even other coding. But for blockchain, I'm not sure how much code there is out there so how easy or difficult is it for someone who's been in tech but not known blockchain to break it? Is it even possible, or is the bar already high?
Been in tech but doesn't know blockchain.
But doesn't know.
Okay.
It is easy, in fact, because think of it this way, there are certain languages that you have to learn. So if you're already an excellent coder, you'll just pick them up in a couple of weeks. And then the logic of coding stays the same. In fact, people are coding even in C. A lot of code is written in C. Solidity is a new language that you'll have to learn. But if you're an excellent coder, it means you are able to pick up languages fast. So maybe it could be just like you picked up Python one day or Java someday, is the same way that you have to pick up a new language. But the logic behind things stays still the same. So for anybody who's in tech, right, whether it's product roles, whether it's engineering roles, you might have to spend some time understanding what blockchains are, what are their applications, what are the challenges today. But then it's all about your enthusiasm, right? So whenever you are changing industries, whenever you have to get to any new job, you do your research. You understand whether you're aligned with the company or not, whether you're aligned with the technology, whether you could imagine yourself being there for the next 5 years or so. And then it really depends on your confidence and willingness to learn. And even for non-tech jobs, right, there are marketing jobs there are business development jobs there are HR jobs. So all of these other jobs still remain. So for any person who's outside the ecosystem looking in, of course it's going to look daunting, but there are enough resources now all over. So on YouTube there are a lot of blogs. Each of these blockchains have their own websites where you can go through what projects are building on them, you can go through white papers which tell you what their tech vision is all about. And then I think doing a bit of research in 1-2 months, you can be prepared enough to go for it. It all depends on your confidence, and the rest you will learn on the job.
If you were interviewing Mario, what would you ask him as a question in an interview?
Let me think. Why do you want to get into the blockchain space? What fascinates you about it?
You actually are in tech.
Yeah.
If you want to enter blockchain, let's see where the gaps are. So she's asking you a question. Why do you want to enter?
So what do you find fascinating about blockchains, and why would you want to?
Okay, what I find fascinating about it is it's a particular tech which can revolutionize the entire way we work, way we live today, right? If I have can have all my transactions on a blockchain, if all the documentation which I use officially can be on blockchain, land records, my house property documents, if all that can be on a blockchain, private blockchain owned by the government, I can be secure, right? I don't need to have it in paper, I don't need to keep it. I know the government now has something, the DigiLocker stuff. I'm not sure whether DigiLocker and other is on blockchain.
No, it's not.
It's not on blockchain, right? So they can have all, if blockchain can be used, and I'm not sure whether that's the way we are heading, but if that's the way we're heading, and I know a lot of people are thinking about it already, I'd like to be in this space because I think if the moment it starts being accepted, when we have large acceptance, then this would be one of the places I'd like to be in. So that's why I want to be it. A caveat is we've been at this stage for at least 5, 6, 7 years. People are still trying to make the break, and I'm guessing that's why these days it's still a bit off, and maybe that's why the barriers to entry are not that high yet, because it still hasn't got complete adoption as much as we want. But if that's your question to me, this is what my answer would be. Because
that's how you interview.
It's good. He's being honest.
He's being very honest.
He's
so I mean, because it's if it gets adoption, I mean, it's going to be part of the future, and I can just think that there's going to be a lot more techs apart from Solidity products just keep coming and adding on, and people will just grab it.
See, I told you this will happen, no?
So in fact,
I told you this would happen today. She's going to turn and speak to you, but it's fine. Go ahead.
So in fact, the tech that you're talking about, right? Apart from that, the most fascinating part for me was the cryptocurrency technology, right? So it's actually cryptography that is in place that runs blockchain. So for people who are interested in tech, that's a really good field to get into.
Why?
So so when you look at the past, you'll see a lot of okay. So when I grew up, I used to love all of these intelligent detective novels, and a lot of them involved this cryptographer who could break these codes and all of that, right? It was just
a digital
Dan Brown,
digital
fortress, and it's actually that in real life, right?
Okay.
So Dan Brown makes it very sexy and very interesting and easy looking, but that's actually the tech that blockchains run on. So the whole point is, for the security aspect, they are using cryptography, and a lot of new tech that is coming up, it's all on cryptography. So ZK technology, zero knowledge technology, the basics behind that is cryptography. All of these blockchains are built on cryptography. So there's a lot of good, interesting tech happening. So when you talked about your fascination for blockchains, right, the vision you're already aligned on, right? So if I'm an interviewer, I'm listening to you, I understand that you know what we are trying to do with it. And when you're hiring any new employee, that's the first thing you look for, right? That, okay, this person believes in the vision of blockchains, which is why they want to work in it. So that's one. Then the second thing I would check for is your knowledge of it. That would be my second question, that, you know, how much well versed are you with blockchains? How much do you know about them? And third, I would ask you which roles you're interested in, because there are a lot of roles happening. So the assumption that you had, that, you know, there's a very high standard or high expectation of people joining it, it's for specific roles. Like, let's say I wanted a very specific policy role within blockchain, I would expect you to have policy experience. Or if I want you to lead the so cryptography today doesn't have any rules, regulations, right? It's a new technology, so policies are being made.
Example of a policy?
So any country, they are making rules around cryptocurrency, right? Country specific rules. It could be like USA wants to create a bill about cryptocurrency, and for that you need legal and policy makers coming together. That's where I would.
Oh, legal policies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like policy.
I thought these were cryptographical, technical policies.
No.
What should
No.
Legal policies?
Yes,
like global data protection rules. Those
correct.
Okay.
So that's where I would expect somebody who has knowledge if I'm hiring. But otherwise, there are many other roles where you don't really need that much experience, and your enthusiasm and experience from other places will be transferable here.
Okay.
As an example, people who do sales and growth, right?
Yeah.
They so in Polygon itself, we had people coming in from YouTube, we had people coming in from EA, it's a gaming company.
Yeah.
So people had come there, and then they were leading BD here, because we wanted to onboard a lot of gaming companies.
Okay.
We had a DeFi team, decentralized finance, where a lot of people with financial CA backgrounds and all used to work there, because they knew how to sell the tech. So
ladies and gentlemen, it is my sincere regret to announce that this will be the last podcast of Mario Rosario. He will be leaving us very soon. So enjoy this phase for as long as you can see it. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, interestingly, you mentioned you liked detective novels when you were growing up. So, could you tell us a little bit about what used to keep you intrigued about those detective novels? And the second question, you know, I always, even when I think about myself, you know, when you're growing up, you do, and people talk to you about what you want to do when you become big, and then you think you do X, you be X, Y, Z, and you end up becoming PQR. You end up becoming. Do you ever think that you'll end up in a blockchain company when you were in school? Was blockchain even around? What did you think you would become? How surprised are you?
I wanted to become. I wanted to. It wasn't around when I was in school.
I won't be around in the next podcast.
He's trying to ask all questions now, because he won't be around next time. So the first question about books, right? I loved a lot of type of books. I think specifically around detective novels, I just loved how they planned the premise of murders or robberies and these things, and how the smart detective went around figuring out clues and patterns and talking to people to get more information to solve these puzzles. So be it Dan Brown or Agatha Christie, I really used to love those novels. Even the characters in the novels always fascinated me, because it showed how people think. The dialogues fascinated me, so I think that's what I loved about it. Even if I go even way back, it was around Famous 5, Secret 7, and you'll see these kids coming together. to solve these mysteries and puzzles. I think that's the part I really enjoyed, solving puzzles, unknowns, uncertainties, finding clues. So that was the part. Now around what I wanted to be the Prime Minister of India when I was a kid. So you can see I'm way off that tangent already.
How old?
But
I mean, you don't answer that, but you're still quite young. So
think of it this way, I'm not interested in that anymore.
That's different.
Age doesn't stop me. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to become. Then there was a point I wanted to become an astronaut as well. So yeah, that's a typical childhood dream. But as I grew up, I think it was more to do with what I liked in the moment. So I used to love math and I hated biology. So when I went to 11th standard, I was clear I didn't want to continue with biology. That's when I picked math, electronics, and decided to go into engineering. Then I went into, I got into IIT
What
Bombay.
engineering did you do?
I did metallurgy and material science in IIT Bombay.
Metallurgy and material science.
Yeah.
And then you switched to blockchain. That's interesting.
It took many years till I switched to blockchains. In fact, after my university, I first got into Procter Gamble, which
Metallurgy to Procter Gamble. What did you do in Procter Gamble?
in Procter Gamble, it's a techno-managerial role. So you're supposed to work in the plant. I used to work in the packing division where they did Tide and Ariel. And so you get to work in the plant. You learn a lot about the technology at play there. It involves a lot of mechanical, chemical, metallurgical, material science, engineering. And at the same time, it's a managerial role because you get to learn about leadership, lead the project.
How old were you when you were in PNG? I mean, a proper question would be,
No, because
how many years
at what
back
age
was that?
At what age did she become a manager straight out of IIT Bombay?
Yeah, that was the first.
First,
yeah.
so early 20s.
Yeah.
Impressive, huh? That's why I was wondering.
That's how PNG. That's what PNG hires for. They believe in making leadership right from the get-go. They believe everybody is a leader. So when they hire new people, also there are trainings people undergo. There are leadership trainings, project management trainings, safety trainings. So you're taught and you're given really big projects from the first day. Like my first project was to just improve the packing line. So increase its efficiency, productivity, and that had direct cost implications on the company. So every person gets to do really big projects when they join. A lot of my friends also got really good projects about creating new machines, installing new lines. So PNG does believe in that principle.
Where is the
of
factory in India?
the one I worked at was in Hyderabad.
Hyderabad.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are many others, and the Hyderabad one was very interesting because it was the most modern Procter Gamble plant in India back then, and they wanted to make it the biggest one. So it was a lot of good learning for me. So that's where I worked first. Then I joined Schlumberger, which was an oil and gas company. That's where I worked in the field, oil field.
You went to an oil rig?
Yeah, I've worked with oil rigs for a long time.
I don't think I've known, I'm thinking about it. I know quite a few people who've been in oil rigs. I don't think I've known a single woman who's worked in an oil rig.
Yeah, we are very rare.
Yeah, I don't know a single woman who's worked in an oil
Yeah,
rig.
so even in my division, I think there were some 105 guys and I was only woman. So it was, it is rare. I've gone to many oil rigs in India and Malaysia, Gujarat, East Coast, and even land rigs in Tamil Nadu. And
So tell me, what's the experience been? Have you stayed for a full day or few days? What's the experience
Yeah.
been living in an oil rig?
oh, it's crazy. So the thing is, first of all, the job is very hectic and crazy. So the way it works is you're supposed to work for like 60, 90 days continuously, no Saturdays, no Sundays, and it's a 12-hour shift, and then travel or reporting, all of that. So it's like 16-hour long working days. And after the 60-90 days are done, then you get a 20-30 day break. So that's a very different career in itself. And now working on the oil rig, again, then you don't have mobile phones because it's dangerous to be in an oil field with technology.
So how
there.
do you communicate with the outside?
There are satellites and all inside, or there are walkie-talkies. And we do have laptops, but they are in a safe area. So there's the oil rig, and then you have different places where you're allowed to have that, and it's so it's a work setup. So you have computers and all that are meant for that. And once my shift is over, then you can go back to your accommodation where you get access to the internet again.
Which is still in the oil rig, right? Which
Yes.
is in that whole.
Yes, yes.
So it's
So the experience is, think of it this way, that you literally have a whole oil field. There is a bunch of equipment there, and oil and gas is pumping from the ground, and you're supposed to work with it. So I used to work in the reservoir testing department. So let's say on exploratory wells, we used to explore the wells, and so my division used to test it, that how much oil and gas is coming along, and then we had to calculate that if you had to convert this exploration well into a development well, or a production well, how many years will it last? So let's say there's a well, you try to pump oil and gas out, and you realize the energy and flow isn't enough, right? So it will only last 1-2 years. Then it doesn't make financial sense for the company to continue digging there. So then you close the well. Versus in some sites, when you're doing the exploration, you realize there's a lot of pressure, and you realize it will last for 10-15 years. That's where the company can then take the call that, okay, we'll convert this well into an actual production well. So we used to have exploration wells, we used to have development wells, production wells, and then you have to kill the well once it's dead. And in reservoir testing, we used to do testing at every stage and then provide details and reports to our clients. So Schlumberger was a service company, so we provided the technology that companies need to work in oil and gas.
okay.
Yeah, and so we used to learn about all of these technologies. We had a lot of emphasis on safety. We used to learn about geology, oil and gas flow. So all of this we had to learn. We also learned about how resilient you have to be in such an environment, right? Not everybody can actually work in such areas. Like I remember there was this one project where there was a proper heat wave happening, but there was no holiday, so we had to work through it, managing.
Oh, that's disappointing. See, because an oil rig, when I think of an oil rig, I think of, you can go up to the deck, right up to the deck, and you can almost see a 180-degree view from all angles, because there's no civilization.
Yeah.
So you actually can get to see a sunrise and a sunset.
Yeah.
I also see the sun. That's what she said.
Let's talk about the sunrise and sunset. I think you can also get to sit on the deck and have a cup of tea and watch the sunset.
Everything
No. So that is true. He is right. Yes.
I mean, people would try and go find places in the country where you can get the clear view of a sunset. You're getting it just for a song.
But that's for 15 minutes. My whole 16-hour day.
Every day.
No, but that's 15 minutes out.
We have 14-hour work days. It's quite painful. We don't have our phones. And you minimize that by saying we go to the deck and see sunrise.
These are the things we did to keep ourselves entertained and happy. That is true.
Go out and watch the sunset.
So I'll tell you some very exciting things that we did there, right? So I actually used to travel in a helicopter to work.
Nice.
Because that's the way you go to the rig. And there was one project where I remember I had to come back also Delhi. So 7 days, that was my Uber, the helicopter was my Uber. And before we joined Schlumberger, we were also taught that if a helicopter crashes, then how are you supposed to escape, get out? So there was a proper 3-day helicopter underwater egress training that happened. So that was fun. Then we were taught how to handle radioactive material. So we actually, there are, because radioactive materials are used in oil field quite a lot.
Not know that. Okay.
Yeah, to test stuff. Then many of the equipment had radioactive components to it. So we were taught to do that. And I remember one Diwali where I was discussing with a friend who was on another rig, how are you spending on Diwali? And incidentally, both of us were supposed to test some radioactive materials. And so these are experiences.
Around an oil rig. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
So these are very unique experiences which I feel not many people in the world get access to. At the same time, Schlumberger was a multinational company, so we had people all over different countries working together. There was a training that I had attended which was in Paris, so I got to live there for 3 months. It was a proper classroom environment with 13 people. They were training us on reservoir. So I was in reservoir testing. So 3 months involved theory and practical aspects of what I'm going to see on the job when I actually go there. And it was a very unique experience. So for sure there are elements of the job that were just brilliant.
So I know that, working on an oil, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, this line of work, working on an oil rig pays really well.
It is supposed to, theoretically, But since oil and gas has kind of declined in the world, right? So the profit margins reduced, and since then there was a lot of cost efficiency and all, especially in Indian companies. They didn't really pay that well for the amount of work that you were supposed to do. So they might pay double of your regular jobs. Earlier they used to pay 5 times those of regular jobs. So then it made the trade-off easier to take, right? So if you're as an example, if you're working in Saudi, or let's say you're working in UK, there you'll be minting say 1 crore, 1.5 crores a year, and for a first or second job, that is very good for youngsters, right? So there it made sense. But in India it wouldn't be like that. You might be earning maybe 30-40 lakhs. So then that it didn't make that experience worth it for many. For some people it did.
Yeah. So I have another, impression. Maybe you can correct it. So working in an oil rig, how many times do you need to have divers go down and check what's going on? Is it all visible on cameras how the oil is being pumped up, or do people still from now and then need to put on the diver gear just to go and inspect whether everything is fine?
That used to be some departments, but most of the times it's all technology. So we had gauges, pressure, temperature gauges that we used to send through the well, and that's how the testing was done. So humans don't have to go there. Humans have to work on the rig.
Okay.
So near the well, and to all the different equipment that we have to run it. And
maybe I watch too much of Hollywood. You always see these things and people dive in because there's something wrong and somebody has to dive in, and then there's an explosion and there's a shark coming in from nowhere.
So how long were you in this project?
In Schlumberger?
In Schlumberger?
Almost 2 years.
2 years, and then straight in Polygon Labs.
No, then I joined another startup, which was called Cashflow. It was a fintech startup. There were only 5 of us, including 2 founders. So after Procter Gamble and Schlumberger, I realized that in these companies, right, these are 100-year, 150-year-old companies. So you have a lot of processes in play and set mechanisms, a particular way hierarchy is going to work. And I thought it was too slow for me. Back then I was interested in learning very fast, learning a lot of things, and you didn't get that much flexibility there. But I knew that people in startups get a lot of flexibility. You get to work across different domains and you get to learn very fast. And that's why I was interested in startups. So I started looking out. I was interested in finance, education, environment, travel, specific industries I was passionate. So I was looking through them, and then I came across Cashflow. I really liked the founders, and after meeting them, I figured that so think of it this way, I'd always worked in supply chain companies, right? Procter Gamble, Schlumberger, both somewhere, they involve a lot of distribution, production, manufacturing. So I knew that aspect of running companies, but I didn't know the financial aspect of running companies at all. Plus I didn't have any finance degree. So I knew that you need to get an MBA typically to get into pure finance companies, which I didn't have, but I knew startups wouldn't keep that as a constraint.
Okay.
That's when I decided to look for fintech startups, because I knew that they'll just look for enthusiasm, willingness to learn, and my experience in operations, strategy, and team management was good enough. And that's how I decided to work in startups and Cashflow. That was the first one. And it was literally like building a company from scratch, because there was just 5 of us, right? So you have to do everything. So I've done sales, marketing, product, talking to vendors, then creating new processes and creating the whole departments, hiring. You do everything when you are in a startup. So I did.
Sorry, Joseph, what exact role did you have in this? What was your role there?
The role really doesn't matter. Actually, in early startups, it was customer success manager. So basically, the founders used to sell the product to a big company. It was a B2B. So they used to sell to large companies like Tata Sky, Lupin, such companies. And then once the MOU is signed, I have to take over and basically then implement, design the program, implement it, and open the program for them. That's the role I was initially hired to do. But then of course, once you get into the startup, you end up doing everything. I remember I joined in May, and then the founder, he had been working there since a year and had taken no holidays. So in July, he decided to take off to the US for 10 days on a vacation. He's like, I won't be available. And like, what? I've just joined. I have no idea what to do, anything. He's like, it's okay, you manage. and he just left off to the US. So for 10 days, it was me and the other woman, she was called Zaitun, and both of us just figured out the system. We figured out the back ends, the front ends, we talked to clients, and we literally managed the fort for 10 days till he came back. And that's how fast we had to learn there, because there's no official training, right? And then whatever we learned, we just went ahead with it.
How from what I hear, you've never done something like this before. I'm not. Did any of your previous experience prepare you for this?
Partly. So something like stakeholder management, project management was something that I was good at, but fintech, no. So I had to learn on the job. And of course, the founder had given some pointers that you can do this, that. But yeah, the rest you had to learn. So I had to. Back then AI didn't exist, so I had to Google stuff. I had to find out. Then I had to go through the system to understand what have they been doing. And yeah, of course, it was extremely scary. But you don't have an option. You have to swim. So yeah.
So how did this experience shape your future decisions? Because you were in basically old world companies before this. Procter Gamble, still considered an old world company, right? And this was 21st century, right? Startup. The jump was huge, right? Style of working was also huge, right? Very calm, very methodical to completely abstract.
Chaos.
So how were you able to adjust for it? Was mentally, psychologically, how were you able to adjust to it?
I think there was no time. Like you didn't really have time to reflect and think about all of this, because it's.
Think about it. No, I know people who, after working for a few months, they're like, I can't take this.
I'll tell you what, she answered your question beautifully. She doesn't have time to get stressed or wonder if I can do it. She just got started doing it.
And when I joined, right, I had already thought of it as the worst case scenario. The worst case, what will happen is 6 months into it, I realize I'm not capable of doing this, or I realize that I'm not made for this, and then I can still go back, right? So that is something that I had prepared myself with mentally. Secondly, I had given myself that time, fine, you will be messing up along the way, and it's okay, because I trusted the founders, right? When I was interviewing, I trusted them to support me. Because the team in general has always been important for me. Like for any job, I feel that the team you join, the vision that you're working on is very important, along with the pay and hours, of course. And I trusted that when I joined. So I gave myself that time to make mistakes or to feel like a fuck up. It turned out, I mean, it didn't happen. But yeah, even now, when I've started my own startup, I have that premise that okay, it could fail, maybe it will not do so well, but at the same time I'm confident that okay, if I figure that in 1-2 years that it's not working, I am capable enough to again go back to the life I know or the career that I know.
Fast forwarded a little bit, so let me rewind. So you were here, and you've already spoken about Polygon. Do not ask any more questions about blockchain yet.
Just one thing I wanted to, so you mentioned, right, and this is exactly why I wanted to join startups. You mentioned it was a drastic shift, and that shift I was aware of. It's like I had already seen these 100-year-old companies and how they work, how good their processes are, how they train people, how they care about safety, how they bring leadership qualities out of people, right? I had already seen that. That's why I wanted to work in startup, because I'm like, okay, now this is the other spectrum of it, where nothing is certain and you're just figuring everything out and you get to do everything. That's why it was a conscious decision to join small teams and startups, so that I can learn from it. Because someday I think I always wanted to have my own business or passion, and I felt back then very strongly that finance is a part of running companies that I don't know. And in supply chain finance startup, I actually learned that. I understood how money flows, how distribution networks work, how procurement works. So how that money flows was an important thing that I learned in cash flow. And even in Polygon, it was a startup. It was a multinational startup, but it was a startup. So again, I learned those things over there as well. So it was a conscious decision to get into.
Do you feel that when you moved to startups, was it at the back of your mind that now that I learned how processes and principles work in the real world, if I'm joining a startup, maybe I can bring some of that learning here? Because were you able to successfully do it? Because environments, they're quite
Yeah.
scatterbrained for some.
So the learning, again, the learning there was, these companies have had 100 years to create their processes, train people, right? So you're supposed to break it down to levels that you can apply in a startup. So you can't expect perfection from day one. So you do the basic minimum. As an example, in fact, so I'd seen how important training used to be in these two companies. So, okay, the philosophy of Procter Gamble and Schlum was, we'll hire the best people, like based on their character and of course some bit of background and things that they were looking for, and the rest we'll train them on the job. Like, this is the philosophy these companies have. So they hire the best of people and then they train them. So even in Procter Gamble we had a proper training program. Even in Schlum I had a 3-month training program. And that's the same thing that I believed when I joined these startups, right? So I created training programs. So let's say I'm hiring the best people and then I give them 1-2 weeks of specific training. What that ensures is whatever they've learned in those 2 weeks, right? In the next 1 year, they will be able to work on their own. There are also companies which don't do that, right? They'll tell people, okay, you have time, and then they'll spend 6-8 months people trying to figure stuff out. It just makes it a bit more inefficient. So yes, those principles that I learned from there, I did apply here. Stakeholder management was taught over there, so I did apply here. Project management was taught, so I did apply it here. So a lot of these traits or behaviors, they can be replicated in startups. You just have to know how to scale up and down depending on this, and that I learned, because initially, yes, I used to expect certain perfections, or I used to expect things to be better, and then the realization was that no, you have to scale it down and start small, and then little daily you make some improvements, and by the end of 6 months when you look back, you're like, okay, this is crazy improvement. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, at the peak of your tenure in this cash flow, how many hours a day were you working?
Weekdays would be like 10 hours,
Were
10,
you
12
working
hours.
on the weekends too?
Saturdays used to be half day, but Sundays I didn't work. And this is something I had decided before I joined. So I had aligned with the founders that I don't want to work on weekends because I need that time to myself. So weekdays I did work, but that also varied, right? So on the days we have really big clients and there are issues coming up, you'll end up working 10, 12 hours. On other days when it's more planned, where you are doing more of long-term projects, there you can work for 6-8 hours.
So where I was going with this question, did the founders ever offer you a stake in the company?
Yeah. When I joined, you were given ESOPs.
You were given ESOPs,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, eventually companies grow, right? So this is an idea I have. I think that, and there's a lot of discussion happening in the media today about, we all need to work, 70 hours a week for India to become a prosperous nation. I think that people need to be incentivized to work longer. And maybe part of that incentive could be ESOPs, apart from a good paycheck. Because otherwise, if I'm slogging 10 hours a day for 7 days a week, I may be getting a good paycheck, but I'm not getting any part of the capital which was put in, right? So maybe a good way would be to offer more ESOPs to people, and I'm not sure whether all startups do it. Maybe in the startups you worked in, do you feel that ESOPs are given generously to everyone?
So first I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned you believe people should be working long hours and all. Why? Like, I'm curious to understand what's your rationale behind it.
I don't say I believe people should be working long hours. What I believe is people should be incentivized. If I want the best out of someone, I incentivize them, right? There's a carrot and stick.
So what is best out of someone according to you?
Productivity, high productivity.
Okay.
He should be passionate about doing it, right? And probably he should not push himself over the edge in doing it, because sometimes all of us who are passionate, push ourselves over the edge and then we fall ill, and a lot of things happen to us, right? So there's this very thin line, right? But for a lot of people, the productivity, you may be in a job, you just may clock in whatever hours you're supposed to do, and whatever you're supposed to do, you just go back.
Yeah.
But to get people to come in with that fire and passion and work because they believe in something, apart from their salary, I think they should be incentivized. And maybe in a startup, which I mentioned, mentioned, maybe in a startup, if there's this extra incentive of ESOPs, then you feel, oh, I'm a part of what I'm doing also. I'm not just getting this, getting a pay. So that's the extra thing. So do you think that ESOPs is the one of the best
You
ways?
didn't answer the question yet.
Yeah, I did, I believe.
No, you didn't answer.
No,
She doesn't know. I think she thinks I did.
no, he shifted from.
She did.
So
Heavily shifted.
No, I'll tell you. So basically, he started off with we need to incentivize long hours, but
Yeah.
then he himself, I think, realized it was productivity that.
And then he didn't explain how can someone be, how is, okay.
He gave some examples of coming with passion at work.
I would really.
Thankfully, you're not sitting here.
So, okay, there are a lot of things that you've spoken about, so and a lot of things that I would like to pick from this and talk about. Okay, so I believe that if you think of a salary, right, you're only going to, it's going to matter one day in the month, right? When you receive the salary, you're like, oh yeah, I've got this money. Same with ESOPs, you're not going to see them realized for years. So in both the startups that I have joined, I haven't seen the ESOPs realize yet, right? Because it's a long-term thing. So I believe while logically it's an incentive, but in the long term, okay, on a day-to-day basis, that's not going to drive me, right? Because I'm not going to be thinking every day, oh, I'm getting paid for this, oh, I'm getting paid for this, or yeah, I'm going to become rich because of my ESOPs or whatever. So that is not what drives people on a day-to-day. What will drive people on a day-to-day will be the work that they'll be doing, like actually the part of the role that you're doing, right? The work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It could be the field they are in. So if you are in a field that you're passionate about, it won't feel like work. So example in blockchain, I used to love studying about technology and blockchains. So for me it was like, oh, this is crazy that I get paid for it. Like I would study it even if I was not in this sector, right? It's the same with psychology now. Like I'm in the psychology space and I have always been so passionate about it. And now I feel, okay, I'll get paid for it. It's just great. So the second is the field of study that you're passionate about if you're working there. The third is a team, right? So if you have supportive people around you, if you have people who are really good at what they do, it inspires you to learn from them. So the team becomes a big part of, you enjoying your work. Then at the same time is having a balanced life. So maybe your family, your relationships, your friendships, if they are also going well, your health, all of that is also going well. Now all of these will come together to make you a very happy, balanced person who can turn up as their best self at work, right? And very few companies actually focus on all of that, right? And somehow I have always been conscious about this when I was selecting. So not in, so Procter Gamble and Schlumberger, my aim was to learn, right? But after that I was clear that I wanted that work-life balance. I wanted to spend time with friends and family. So when I joined Cashflow, like I mentioned, I had already decided that this is what I want. Even in Polygon, it was a remote job and I wanted it because I could get time to pursue reading. I could spend time with my family more. So all of these things were very conscious decisions behind what I did, and I've always had the most fun in my jobs when the team around me used to be excellent, right? Like in Polygon, the engineers around me were so good at what they did. The team was very supportive. The same in Cashflow, like they were excellent at finance, they were excellent at sales, and that's where I enjoyed the most. In teams, in the same companies, there were projects that I did where I didn't enjoy the team so much, right? Or I wasn't learning from them, or I felt like, okay, I'm the best person in this room right now, so I'm not really learning a lot from others. That's where I used to feel stagnant, and then I didn't enjoy it. So that's just who I am, and I feel for every person, right? We could bring you into the conversation now. So he's been silent for a very long time.
I'm listening. I'm enjoying this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in your case, think about it this way: you've joined Toastmasters, right? So what are the aspects of Toastmasters that you enjoy?
When I joined, I had moved from Bangalore to Mumbai, and I didn't know anyone in Mumbai. So I wanted to get out of my comfort zone and find something to join. I went out, I tried to join Rotary, I tried to join a bunch of organizations. Toastmasters was an easy fit. So that's why I joined. I wanted to meet new people, have some fun.
So you had fun with the people around you, right? You found something that you were going to learn. So even if it's not a job, right? It's not a paid job, but he still continued with it because that's one aspect of it. Then maybe if you look at your personal life, you realize there were times in your life where it might not have been that good, and then times that where it has been good, and you would always prefer the times where it has been good. So I think all of that makes a long lasting, good, fulfilling career, and people should take time to consciously think about it, because if a lot of times majority of people just keep running from job to job, or just stay stuck in jobs feeling that they don't have a way out, that's where I believe that just spending even a week, right, thinking about what you really want, what do you enjoy, what kind of team do you want to be a part of, what kind of personal life do you want. If you can even start, like, stop, think about these things and take a conscious decision to realign your career and life, that's how it will help. And how that helps is, when you have people like that working in the team, you're going to see their productivity. Like, when I am happy with my health, when I am fit, when things at home are going really well, that's when I'll be turning up in a happy way at work, right? Versus if something bad has happened at home, of course my mood is going to be low, or I'll not really be in the right mind space or present at work, because I'll be thinking about these other things. Or if I'm sick, people come to work sick. I've seen that all my life. I always used to take holidays when I was sick. I never used to work. Even if it's something like a common cold, I took 2 days off, because I felt that, okay, I need to give that time to myself to recover, and then I'll be better present at work. But you'll see people working even when they have fevers and colds, they're not going to be productive on that day, right? And there, even the manager's leadership has to be cognizant that this is going to work against you. This person is not paying attention, they are falling more sick. The decisions they make are actually going to be physically impaired in some way, right? Because you're not top of your game. So you would rather want them to stay at home, rest, come back when you're better, so that you're better at making decisions. That's my take on productivity, and I don't believe long hours does that, because as an example, when I was in Schlum and I'm working long hours, I had zero time for friends and family, right? And that aspect of my life was cut off. It was not something that I could sustain for a long time, and that's what I kept thinking about then, that, oh, this is not going to work, this is not going to work, or I'm missing festivals, I'm missing family trips, I'm missing friends get-togethers, and you do keep thinking about it, then you turn up the best at work.
You know, here's the thing, sometimes, someone, maybe I won't speak for Krishna, I'll speak for myself, I work, and then, I got so many books to read, and I got a blog to do, so my mind is always working, so a lot of times I end up not spending as much time with friends or family, I occasionally call that, I maybe should have, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Do I need help?
Okay, so there is this thing in psychology where they say if something's not broken, you don't need to fix it, right? Now there will be aspects that you want to fix, then you can work on that.
Yeah, because people have told me, hey, you don't hang out as much as other people, and I'm like, yeah, but I seem to be fine with that.
Got it.
So, do you think that maybe the way the world has produced in this rat race we are in, some people like me maybe have become so comfortable with this way of working that it has just become a norm, and I don't feel there's anything wrong with it. And there are some people who are like, how are you okay with this? I'm like, maybe this is the new gene which is emerging, breed of people that we're perfectly fine running this fast. Not like I'm running as fast as you though, and we are fine with it.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it's not broken, you don't have to fix it, right? Now, the question to ask yourself is, what are the things I want to do that I'm not able to, right? That is the question you ask. You don't look at what other people want to do, right? It's their life, they'll design it that way. Now, there might be some things in your life which you've wanted to do for a long time. You keep thinking about it, but you're not doing it. Now, that's where you can focus. It could be anything. I don't know what you want, but that's the thing. And about the rat race, okay, I honestly feel it's not something of this generation. So you both have read books, right? You read a lot of books. Oh, come on, Krishna. So you see that people, even back then, there were people like these. There were people who were family oriented. There were people who have, like, you look at some authors and all they've done is just write all their life, right? And you see their idiosyncrasies pan out when you read these books. So I think humans have always been similar, no matter 100 years past or 200 years past. Every generation feels that we are the only generation who is going through this, but that's not the case. So even if you talked about, say, in your grandfather's era, there will be people who were artists and painters and There were people who were doing your typical 9 to 5 jobs, and that's all they did in life. There were some people who were jobless even back then and doing like just going day by day. So you'll always see this in every generation. My only point is, now that we have access to technology, we know what the world does, you can spend more time being more conscious. And the part you mentioned about running, right? So personally, I do believe in this thing called do nothing time. So I actually spend a lot of time where I don't plan anything, and those hours are just meant to do nothing. So I'm literally sitting in a chair and just staring, and that's it. That's what I'll do on
meditation, yoga.
It's not meditation, just do nothing time. Meditation and yoga is again going for productivity somewhere, right? Oh, you want to do something with that time. Do nothing time is you just sit and do nothing.
See, I can't do this. Do you think I need help? Because now I think I really need help.
You can
help in general.
So think of it as something new to try, right?
Okay.
And okay, you worked since a long time. It's finally out of some training, right? Like you've trained yourself to do it over years. You've not trained yourself to do nothing. So you start small. You time yourself. You spend 5 minutes doing nothing today. Tomorrow you increase it to 7 minutes. Then the day after you can increase it to 10. The beautiful thing that I realized right through this is, do nothing time is actually like a part of your day where your brain is doing nothing, right? And so it starts finding patterns. It starts observing things. It has certain realizations that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't done it. So as an example, I remember one day I was just sitting, I have a wing chair at home that I really enjoy. It's like a velvet green wing chair where I sit and I read and have my coffee and what. So that's a really favorite spot of mine. And I was sitting there. It was a do nothing time. So I'm just staring. Okay, and I'm staring. I'm like, okay, this spot in my room looks really dirty. I need to clean it. And then I looked at my window. I'm like, oh, there's this. These are random thoughts my brain is coming with. So I traveled to Shimla or something years back, and those flags that they have. So I bought it, and I was like, oh, that flag is there. I can put it in the window. And then I'm looking at my floor and thinking, oh, it would be very nice if I had a carpet here. And then I'm going through it. I'm looking at books. Oh, this I've not done since a long time. Then I looked at my calendar. It hadn't been changed from the last month. So all of these things I realized, and these were all ideas coming up out of that do nothing time. So after that do nothing time was done, I did that. So I brought up the flags, I put it, then I brought a new carpet which I enjoy, and then so I read that particular book that I had left since a long time. And this was possible because I spent that day was 22 minutes, I timed myself, of doing nothing. And then I even appreciated small things, like out of the window I could see trees. I saw my bed, I'm like, oh, this is beautiful, this is where I sleep. So this is what comes out of a do nothing time, right? Your brain automatically starts coming up with ideas or things to do. So it's like your unconscious part of the mind, you're letting it be rather than always being targeted, doing something. In fact, my current startup idea that came out of months of this, like doing nothing. Like I always want to start a startup. I'm like, you have to come up with a domain or idea that I'm interested in. And I spent a lot of time just doing nothing, lying down, looking up at the ceiling, wondering, okay, what should I start up in? What should I start up in, right? And these things then slowly started coming together on their own, because somewhere my subconscious mind knows what it wants to do. At the same time, my conscious mind is involved in that decision making.
So there's another word for this, daydreaming.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because I used to, and maybe it's a psychological thing, because when I was growing up, I used to do a lot of this. I used to get beaten for this. I know, oh, you're daydreaming, you're just dreaming. What are you doing? Go get. So it's part of the problem that when we were growing up, we were conditioned against such behavior. So maybe now it's too late in the game to like, that's okay. I can actually sit and keep my mind completely empty. I thought that's not how the way we are supposed to work. We're always supposed to be either doing something, maybe not extremely busy, but always focused. There are quotes which are made. I'll tell you a quote: "An idle mind is a devil's
workshop."
Right? So you're always supposed to be doing something, and now somebody comes and says, "Hey, you know what? This is actually good." So it's a huge mind shift for a lot of us.
So tell me something. You mentioned too late, right? Too late for what? Compared to what is it too late according to you?
I'm saying too late to change one's way of thinking and one's nature. That
What is too late? Like how old are you to think that it's too late?
I'm younger than him. I can tell.
There's the comparison here. But what age do you feel is, okay, after this age I can't change?
Well, obviously your biological clock is ticking ahead always, so you have to factor that in.
What does that have to do with it being too late to do nothing? I'm very
That's
confused.
a good one. It's too late to do nothing. Yeah. Never too late to do nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a belief.
We took a brief break for technical reasons, but I want to come back to what we were discussing.
Do we?
You said that it's a generational issue with productivity, and you specifically wanted to speak about your parents and their view on productivity when she was talking about doing nothing and having to work those stringent hours.
No, I think we were going somewhere else and you just brought this in. However, we will address this point, no problem. So where I was going with this productivity thing is, when I was growing up, right, I used to love to daydream. I used to just sit, I used to read books and I used to daydream and I used to always be told, what are you doing here? Just dreaming, do something productive like your brothers do. Look, he's playing, at least he's playing, his mind is occupied. You're just dreaming and you're in your own world.
Yeah.
You're in your own world. So then I realized that that's something which is not really good. And then I eventually grew up and now when I look back today, I mean, a lot of what I write, the dreams I had are actually coming on paper. I can write it down, but I had to stop it then because I was told it's bad, the usage of time. But now, on the whole, people like you and a lot of people I hear nowadays are saying it's good to just remain calm and just free your mind. Whereas back then, at least I was told that was wrong. So you want to clarify what's your take on this?
So the first thing is, it's fine. When you were a kid, you were told all of that, right? Who's telling it to you now?
Now no one is.
Exactly. So who's telling it to you? It's yourself.
Yeah.
So that is the thing, right? You still constrained yourself by something somebody has told you many years back, and you've believed it and kept it with yourself. Right now, there's no environment doing it to you. So that's the first thing we need to accept, right? There are obviously a lot of things we've been told in childhood that we might have accepted, we've rejected. So it's up to us. It's all in our mind about, what I'm going to believe in, what I'm not going to believe in. That being said, I think when it comes to our parents or grandparents' generations, right, the situation they were in was very different. Not everybody was financially sound or stable. So they had to work a lot towards just building their family from scratch, earning money, which they didn't have. And there was a limited exposure they had, right, which came from looking around them, seeing what their friends are doing, what their parents were doing. You didn't really have an internet which told you what all is possible. So finally you were constrained by your environment someday and you learned something from it. So if your parents were working in banks and government jobs all their life, this is the life you knew. So you thought this is the life. Then you might have explored some more things, right? Okay, you can be a doctor also, you can be an engineer, you can be a lawyer. These were some of the professions that were encouraged back then. Or you have to be like for women, you can be a stay-at-home mom. So these are then that is how you expand your exposure. Then your friends, some of them might do some odd careers, right? You'll always listen to people, this person wanted to be a cricketer but didn't get the chance to be, or this person was interested in arts and this was the only person in my entire class who went this route. But that's where their exposure increased. So that's also a matter of that. Plus they really wanted you to succeed in the way they knew, right? And now when we look at our generation, we have exposure through the internet. We've gone to universities, or you see on Instagram or on Facebook, or even on Twitter, and then you realize there are so many other type of careers people can have, and that's how we have expanded our exposure. So we need not stay constrained with what our parent generation knew. So while I understand where they came from, you don't have to accept it right now when you don't have the same constraints around you. That's what I feel about it. And when it comes to productivity and all, there were a lot of people even in past generations who have just sat. If you look at authors and what they did, right, you will see they used to write for hours and then they went on walks. Like they went on walks in the English countryside for hours, like 2-3 hours they'll just keep walking, or they'll have social meetups. Some people will just stay and do nothing and just think, right? All of these philosophers and all also, they used to have discussions with subjects. So these are, even 500 years back people have done this. So these habits, right, they have existed even in the past. So it's up to you now what you want to do. And I do believe that if you're continuously after something, right, you don't leave your mind the capability to be creative and just go where it wants to go. Versus if you spend that time doing nothing, you'll automatically understand where is my mind going, right? If it's going to a topic again and again, it means there's something about this topic that interests my mind, so let's explore that. But you won't know that if you're not spending time doing nothing. If you're continuously chasing a goal, or you have 10 things to do every single day that I have to do this, then you are not following your let's say curiosities or creativity. And I feel that is also an important part of being good at any job or work. Like if you
nice point to segue into what you're actually doing presently. I believe you also have a startup of your own.
Yeah.
So you've come from a very technical background. You worked on very technical jobs, right?
Yeah.
The oil rig. You went to fintech.
Yeah.
And then blockchain, which is not for anyone to do. It's quite. And then all of a sudden now you have a startup which is completely different from anything you've ever done, not even in the technical space. So so what made you take the plunge into this line of work, which is quite different from what you've been working on? Yeah.
So just a background, the startup is in the psychology and mental health space, right? Psychology, brain, human behavior, mental health. So if you think about it, I think ever since childhood I was always fascinated by people. I used to love talking to people, understanding what interests them, talking to them to understand their view of the world. And this is something I continued. Even when I went to university, I had a lot of clubs I was a part of. And I've always encouraged different viewpoints of the world. I've also been a voracious reader since childhood. So even reading books, you understand there are so many different ways of looking at the world. So people always fascinated me. And then as I started going to jobs, right, I understood, how organizations work, how people interact with each other. And over there I could see inefficiencies, right? In very simple ways. We've probably all done corporate jobs, so we know that people actually don't say what they mean, right? They'll spend 20 minutes beating around the bush instead of saying the one thing they're actually supposed to. And I felt, how is it that we've all got ourselves into this contract with each other where none of us is speaking their minds, right? And there are very few people in organizations who will actually be brutally honest and be talking about what's actually going wrong, versus the others who are meandering around the topic. So that was one thing. Then the other was realizing that so many people are unhappy at their jobs, right? Then the other thing was realizing people are put in a particular role even though it's not something they love, and versus if they were doing something they love, they would be really good at it. Or when people join an organization, I tended to always ask them, why did you join? What are your strengths? And I used to give people projects that played to their strengths, and I realized they did brilliantly at it. But a lot of people in corporates didn't really have that openness, right? It's like, okay, if you're a salesperson, all they did care about is numbers, and then if the numbers are not being hit, it will be a carrot stick approach. So all of these things I used to observe and realize that I used to feel this is not how things are supposed to be, right? And then so this was one thing, like just around people, organizations, how they work with each other. The other part was just understanding that a lot of things, right, are not real, in the sense these are your perceptions about what's happening and not what's really happening. And then that goes into the part of psychology, right? And that is something I was again also very passionate about. So Jungian psychology, Adlerian psychology. Even between my jobs, I have done online courses around psychology. So this is something that fascinated me. Other part was communication. So most effective ways to communicate, how to negotiate, all of these things. I also read a lot of books about startups, and I worked in startups. And one thing I realized is, so there's Shoe Dog, it's about the Nike story. Then there is Steve Jobs' autobiography. There are books where Jeff Bezos has talked about his outlook towards things. And I realized that these people were crazy passionate about something, right? And then when you see their story, you realize that passion drives them. So I always knew that if I want to start a company of my own, it has to be something that I'm really passionate about so that I could stick to it for 10, 20, whatever years. And when I was thinking about these things, I realized that, I love people, I love psychology, I love startups, and I wanted to come up with ideas and problem statements, bringing all of it together. So I actually maintained an Excel sheet where any idea that comes to my mind, this is a problem that's happening, I used to write it down.
This is at what age?
This is last year.
So 1 year you maintained this Excel sheet.
Yeah. So I used to, there's Y Combinator, it's like a startup incubator, and they have really wonderful videos on YouTube, like it's a YC school, and there's this one particular video on how to come up with startup ideas. I'd seen it multiple times over the years, and so somewhere it was there in the subconscious, and that's when I realized that, now I've worked at big companies, I've worked at small companies, I felt like it's the right time now to start something of my own. And so I was maintaining this Excel, and I was just writing about different problems, and I just realized that in general in mental health, psychology is something that I kept coming to again and again. So I used to write things like, okay, there's a loneliness epidemic, pandemic going on, people are so lonely. Or I used to think of anger management, like I've seen this at work, and I'm like, people don't really manage that anger well. Meetings escalate, people escalate, versus if they just calm enough to understand each other's new viewpoints, they could come to a consensus. Then I used to look at, so mental health in general is not a very, it's a very stigmatized topic. So while in the recent years people have more openly talked about it, but since a long time people feel that, okay, if I don't have a problem, why do I need to go to a psychologist? So even if they have problems, they don't think that psychology is going to work. So all of these things I was writing down, then I realized, okay, even if I have to pick a problem, right, are people willing to pay for it? Because that is how you have to create a business. And that's where I was thinking, and one fine day it just struck me that procrastination was one such problem. It did fall under the in the psychology domain, and it is something that I know has been a problem like in my life, although I'm a very high functioning adult that way, but it has been a problem in my life. Then I've seen so many friends and everybody around me talking about procrastination, right? And then I thought, wait, if then maybe it can be solved. So then I started doing research on it for a week, honestly, because I already had a lot of experience in psychology, plus I've done therapy myself for 3 years. So I knew what it's like to be on that side of the table, being a client with a psychologist and working with them, and what changes it's brought in me. And that's how I decided, okay, this is a very good idea to get started on. So many people have this problem, and when I started doing the research, I realized it can be solved. Like it's all there in psychology books around why it happens, how it happens, and how it can be solved. I'm like, okay, then this is something that I can work on. And due to my experience in tech startups, I realized that there are elements to this that can be automated for scale, and it can be something that millions can, first of all, in mental health, the first thing is to accept that something is happening, right? That, okay, I'm getting bothered by something, and so I'll work on it. And I feel procrastination is something that people will easily accept. Like you'll already accept that, yeah, I procrastinate a lot. Versus if I had to tell you, you have to accept that you have anger issues, people will not be that open to accept that, oh, this is a problem that affects me and people around me, so I want to work on it formally. That's how I picked this, and since then I didn't look back. I was like, okay, this is what I want to get into.
So, I'll tell you, for me, I've realized procrastination can be a problem sometimes. But how I work, maybe I psychologically work around this. I list down all what I have to do, and I say, okay, you know what? These are the high priority tasks. So what is prioritized gets done now, and what is not prioritized gets done later. So I tell myself, hey, I was not able to do all this, but I was attending to more high priority tasks in my mind. So something is going to get procrastinated. So I'm okay with it as of then. But in the long run, I go back and like, hey, I didn't get to do this after all. But that's because I was working on the high priority tasks. So is it just, this is how I justify it. So it's like, I'm caught between, rock and a hard place, because I need to get this done. I want to get this one. I end up procrastinating because they are more important. So what would you tell me?
So it's a great thing that you've mentioned this, because I want to actually define procrastination right now, right? Because it's very important. What you were talking about is deprioritization. So per psychology, there are many definitions of procrastination. One is when you want to do something, you really want to do something, but you still keep putting it off. Or there's an word action mismatch where you keep saying, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, and you're not doing it, right? That is procrastination. Procrastination is not when you decide that, okay, these are 10 things I need to do, out of which you prioritize something, decide to deprioritize the rest 8, and they don't bother you. That is not procrastination. Procrastination is actually the psychology phenomena when you want to do something, you know there will be repercussions if you don't do it, but for some irrational reason you're still not able to do it. That is procrastination. So deprioritization is not procrastination. So when users come to us, right, my startup's name is APPA. When users, APPA, it's like anti-procrastination personal assistant.
Nice.
And APPA is also a very easy name for in a
Say
B2C.
Appa. Now say your last name.
Okay, I forgot that.
Okay, so that's how when users come to us, we don't work on what they don't want to work on. As an example, for some people, they're completely fine if their room is unclean, right? It's not a priority for them. That's not procrastination. We don't work on that. But let's say there are some users who are like, I've wanted to exercise for the last year, like many years, and I've never done it. I keep thinking about it. My friends keep pushing me to do it, but I've not done it, right? That is procrastination. The user really wants to do it. There are people who are like, oh, I've wanted to build my social media brand for the last 2 years. I've not done it. I've wanted to write a book for the last 10 years and I've not done it. So these are the things that users themselves believe, I want to do this, but they have not done it. That is where procrastination comes in, and that is where we start working with the user.
So, but in today's world, there are so many tools to help people to avoid procrastination.
Can you give examples?
You have all these, you watch YouTube videos, you have to, for instance, you have to prioritize things. You write in Excel, I have to do this is high priority, I do it, and you block times in a day to do it, I get up at. So, if you look at how the world was 10, 20 years ago, people are more in sync with this. Every other person you see nowadays is either going to the gym, is doing some, it's all around you. So to some extent that could influence how you react to. So it's more easier, in my opinion, these days to build a schedule and hold yourself accountable to it, because there's so many other people doing it. There was 15, 20 years where health and all this was not so much of a priority. So do you still feel that procrastination is actually still a problem, or
So think about it this way, right? Building a schedule is like a very small reason why people are procrastinating. That's actually not the real reason. There are so many psychological reasons why people procrastinate. Now, the branch that I have studied is neuro-linguistic programming. In that, there are 5 reasons why people procrastinate. One is the task is too big for them, right? Like maybe it's something like, oh, I have to change my job, or I have to get married, and the task is so big for them, so they put it off, right? The other is the task is too small for them, which means, oh, I have to fill this form, it's too beneath me, I'll do it later, or I have to open a bank account and they'll just put it off, or I have to apply for this visa, so they'll wait for it, or I have to book a flight ticket. So these are things that people believe are too small for them. Even something like, oh, cleaning my room, it's beneath me, right? The third is if you don't have the skills for something, right? So if I want to be a writer, you need certain amount of skills to reach there, and you are not in the position to do that, so you'll be putting it off. The fourth is you have you believe that this task should not be done, right? Or I'm not this kind of you genuinely believe that this task should not be done. So even though your boss or your family might be telling you to do it, you're not going to do it, right? And the fifth is your own personal belief system that obstructs you from. So you want to do the task, but there are belief systems in you that are stopping you from doing this. So there are all of these 5 things that come. Plus in psychology there are 7 different procrastinator types, right? And every person has different types of procrastinators within them. So unless you know all of those, so it's like a study of what kind of a procrastinator type you are, what all tendencies you have, plus the type of tasks that you are. Think of it like, an x-axis has this, a y-axis has this, and a combination of that that's making you procrastinate. So it's not something as simple as, form a schedule, which is what a lot of productivity experts say, right? Plus the second part is how realistic is it? If you have a proper 9 to 5 jobs, you're married with multiple, like with kids, you have families to take care of, how reliable, like how sustainable or even possible is it, right? It's not even feasible for many people to have such schedules. A lot of experts say, wake up at 4 a.m. and then go to the gym and then do this and have your first coffee at this time. It might work for a small subset of people, not everybody. Now, we have a lot of users who are homemakers, right? And for them, it's not feasible, like, okay, I can't do that. The moment I wake up, my kids are behind me. I have to spend hours with them. Then I have to prepare their food. Then I have to go with them to school. Then I get those 2 hours to do something. And if you come up to them and say, hey, you know what, it's a schedule problem, that's not the case, right? So it's a very nuanced issue and it's a very personal issue, right? It depends on the kind of procrastinator types that are there in you. It depends on the kind of task that you're putting off, and so you need a personalized approach to help you with your procrastination. And that's what most people do today. It's like a one size fits all approach that's recommended, which doesn't really work for everybody.
So your app will identify the type of procrastinator you are,
yes,
and give you specific
yes,
choice.
yes. And so we already have that tech now, where you have to do a discovery call for around 30 minutes.
What's a call? Not a questionnaire.
The first one is, because if you're a procrastinator, you might just put off the questionnaire, right? Like you say you'll do it someday.
You hired a call center already?
No, I do it. I do the calls now.
How many users?
We have 50 plus.
You made 50 calls.
Yeah.
And now you're going to make...
Because, okay, so I've started it in April, right? Now, once I'm doing this, there are parts of this that I realize I have automated. So initially, it's a thing that if you're a startup founder, you should work with the users directly. You should understand why they're using the product, why the techniques we give don't work for them. So I have certain hypotheses, we are testing them. What can be automated. You don't go with a ready-made product on day one and then figure, now people are going to use it. So I have been doing these things myself because I learned the most for them, and then out of that, as an example, when I started, these calls used to last 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Now we have created a process where that interview is done in 30 minutes.
Fantastic.
Then I used to analyze those calls later, right? Okay, what are their belief systems? What are the tasks they are and I used to make this table and notes and all. We will have to listen to and this used to take me 1.5 hours to form that entire profile. Now we have used AI prompt engineering, we have used speech diarization, which is converting audio to text and then tagging speakers. So after doing that, now I just take the call recording, I have to upload it. In 3 minutes we get this entire analysis. So this is how products and startups are built, right? You do something first, then you make it more efficient,
is everyone either one of the 7 types or is some
it's a mix. They are a mix. See, if it was just one type, it would be easy for you to solve it. Like as an example, if you're a perfectionist procrastinator, your perfection is stopping you. So there are only these. There is perfectionist, there is avoidant procrastinator, which means you tend to avoid anything that's uncomfortable or difficult. Your first tendency is let's avoid it.
Okay.
The third thing is arousal procrastination, which is you'll feel motivated only near deadlines. So till then you're doing nothing, and as soon as a deadline comes, that brings in the adrenaline rush for you to do something. Then there's dependent procrastination. So if you're left on your own, you might be doing nothing. The moment there are others pushing you to do something, or you prefer working with people, and then you'll get things done. On your own, you'll actually not do it. These are 4. Then there's overwhelmed procrastination, which is even small. It creates a lot of freeze response in you. The moment you think of even a small task or a big task, you just feel frozen. And then you get immediately overwhelmed that, okay, I won't be able to do this. So you stop. Then there's cultural procrastination, where there are belief systems people have within them that make them think that procrastination is great or is very helpful, right? So that's cultural procrastination. How many did I mention? 6. Let me think of which one.
That's fine, but these are quite good. These are quite good.
And then, of course, people are a mix of it. So as an example, if you were only a perfectionist, you knew that, okay, this is your issue, it would be easier for you to solve it. Versus if you are a perfectionist plus you are an avoidant plus say you are a cultural procrastinator, then all of it is coming together to even do that one task. One example that I really like to talk about is, packing before you go to a trip. There are some people who will pack days in advance and be ready for it. Some people just find the act of packing very difficult, right? And they're like, okay, it's just not my thing. And when you think about it, there are people who will say, it's just packing. Why can't you do it in like half an hour? Why do you need days to do that? Now think about it. If you're a perfectionist procrastinator, you want to pack the perfect amount of clothes. If you're going for 7 days, you know, okay, in the mornings I want to wear this, in the at night I want to wear this, these are the shoes I want to carry. So you want that perfection there. At the same time, you know from experience it's an uncomfortable task for you, to decide, and so you're avoiding it at the same time and you're pushing it for later. At the same time, you might be an arousal procrastinator. So unless the deadline comes, you're not going to. So because these three types have come together, even in a simple act of packing, you're not going to do it. Yeah. Even in simple things like I have to book a flight ticket. Now there are so many choices. You might want the perfect flight, or you keep thinking, well, I'll find a better deal somewhere, or it's not near the deadline. So you see, there are multiple procrastinator types that come together, which makes you not do a task.
So you will take 7 and make a spider web.
Yes, then we know your driving tendencies, and then we do two things in the program. What we do is first we pick up tasks with the user, that okay, what are those things you want to work on? So they'll tell us 1 to 2 and we're like, okay, there might be 10 things, we'll pick up 1, 2 at a time. So we do that, and then we also look at the procrastinator types, and then we work to help them get things done. So there are multiple things. We can help you get things done. The other part is understanding your tendencies more. Like some people don't want help in getting things done. They're like, wo jab aayega time, but I want to work on my tendencies. Okay, we can do that. Then some people want a mix of these two.
How do people contact you? APA is a website.
Right now we have a website.
APA.com.
APAclub.in.
APAclub.in.
Yeah, and we also have an Insta page that we've built. So yeah, and people can just sign up on the website.
If you follow the Pineapple podcast, we'll also follow.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So that's the thing. People have always, a lot of times people have mislabeled procrastination. You might have heard this person is lazy, right? So that's why they never clean their room. That's not the case. They might be overwhelmed by the act of cleaning the room, or they are perfectionists, like either I need my room to be perfect, so they will either do all, like I need a whole day to do this, or I'll do nothing, right? And these things are coming together, and we just mislabel them as this person is lazy. Versus if you understood that it's their perfectionism plus their overwhelmed procrastination coming together, then you could have broken it down for them. You know that okay, you are getting overwhelmed, so you need to work on these feelings of feeling overwhelmed, this freeze response, right? Let's sit, accept that okay, I'm going through this. At the same time, you know that not always you'll have 8 hours and a whole day to be in the perfect mind space to do it. So let's break it down. Today you just clean this chair, right? And then tomorrow you just clean what's on your bed, and then slowly you start working with it. Now that's only if a user tells me that, you know what, room cleaning is an issue I'm facing. There are some people who are very comfortable with it, then we don't work on it.
So this is how procrastination come under the umbrella of mental health?
It does. So in fact, procrastination is a symptom, it's a visible symptom of many underlying disorders. It could be OCD, it could be ADHD, it could be depression. So it is so that's the thing. When I was looking into mental health, right, it's not necessary that everybody is open towards working on these root causes, right? It could be PTSD, it could be anxiety, it could be a lot of things. But procrastination is a visible symptom, right? So that is the first place you can get started with, right? And that helps you in two ways. One, whatever you have not been doing since a long time, you've done it. So that gives you that sense of, confidence and happiness that, yeah, I've been able to do something that I've not. At the same time, you're working on your tendencies. So that makes it better for you in the long run. And with our existing users who have been with us since April, May, they've now even started to ask for solutions to their other problems. Like there was one user who asked me, do you have any techniques on stress management, right? Because they realized when we were doing these tasks that stress is something that suddenly makes them more overwhelmed and they don't know how to handle it. So then we started working on stress management. There was this other person who actually went to therapy after doing this, like, okay, now I feel psychology works, so let me try exploring therapy. There's another person who had been putting off a task and they had a lot of belief system issues. So they also decided to go and start therapy. So these are the things. The aim why I started this was also that you use procrastination as a starting point, and once you realize that these techniques work for you, you will automatically be, in a more friendlier space to explore psychology, therapy, counseling more. The other thing was, even if you are somebody who believes in therapy, right, good therapists are hard to come by, right? It's like any good allopathic doctors, right? A lot of not so good doctors do exist, so you have to ask for references to actually know, I have this heart problem, who can I go to? Then your friends or family from their experience will give you a referral. At the same time, when you go to these doctors, they're extremely expensive. Like good therapists charge 2k, 3k per hour, right? Excellent ones even charge 10k per hour. So, and not everybody can afford that. And my aim was to make psychology, therapy, counseling accessible to the masses in terms of quality plus costs.
What is the charges for you?
Right now it's 10,000 rupees annual subscription, which is extremely, it's like 833 per month while you are working on your very tangible issues that you'll see results. So that's how we've started off. And
what costs have you incurred so far?
Just people. Yeah,
so
salaries.
You have somebody who is
I have 3 developers working with me, but right now they are part-time because it's a bootstrap startup, so I'm using my own funds to do it. So I pay their salaries.
CA, company secretary?
No, nothing.
No. Have you filed? Have you created the company?
No.
Just
right now it's just building the product. Once we will do that once let's say formal funding comes into play. Right now it's not needed. I think the first initial months are going to be testing out all the hypotheses. Now that we have a lot of paying users, we are now building the tech behind it, and we will come to a point where we'll also have to register the company and get started.
Fascinating, man. I love the fact. So a couple of things for me is, I've never heard anyone have a career like yours. Never. Never in my life have I heard. You are the first woman I ever know who's worked in an oil rig. IIT Bombay, and from there PNG, and from there oil rig, and from there no finance background going into fintech, and from fintech deciding now this is not finance enough.
It's not tech enough. It's not tech enough. I wanted to,
and then have a discussion about blockchain with this who absolutely loves it. And from there deciding, okay, this is also not enough. Now let me decide to go on brand new field altogether and sphere, and go into psychology.
Actually, I don't think that's what happened. After all that, she said, now I need some mental peace. Now let's start with mental peace.
Maybe, yeah. So it was 2 things actually. One is when you work for a company, right, you have to follow their rules, their way of working. And I believe that, there are so many things that can change in how companies are run. And that's where I decided that if I have my own company, then I can work by those principles. That was also one thing. And
I'm going to feel like a CEO. I'm getting notes from my editor for some reason. Apparently I'm doing something wrong or I'm doing something right. I don't know what. Oh, acha. The staff has a question for you. You guys could have just asked, but apparently the question is, for someone who is all 6 that you mentioned, procrastinator, could it be due to ADHD? Acha, so I am guessing they don't want to know who wrote this, so I'm asking on their behalf. For someone who is all 6 except cultured, could it be due to ADHD?
I don't know. And the important thing to understand here is we are not working on that. So we are not working on root causes like anxiety, ADHD. We are not working on things like depression, OCD. That is not something our startup wants to get into. When we see such users come, there are users who are like all 7 types in a different scale, or the 5 out of 7 types. We believe so that in psychology, right, it's 3 levels. Think of it as 1, physiology. So maybe your body is not capable of doing something. The other is neurology. So neurology is where the chemicals in your brain and the way your brain is made up, that could have issues. And then there is psychology. ADHD and such conditions, I believe, are on the neurological level, and that's not something we want to get into. What we could do is, as an example, we'll see that you're also an impulsive procrastinator, which means you have focus issues, which means you can't sit in one place physically and focus for more than 2 minutes. We'll try to work around it, and we'll realize, okay, whatever techniques we have tried on the psychology level, they're not working with you. That's where we might come to a conclusion that psychology is not good enough. Maybe we need to check whether this person has a neurological issue in it. And that's why we recommend you to go to a neurologist or a psychiatrist to figure out if you have ADHD. That's not something that APA is going to, because we are not in that field right now. Because as a startup, it's a conscious decision that I don't want to venture into these aspects. Maybe in the future someday, but you have to start small, right, and be specific and focused. So it could happen.
For sure. Somebody here is going to log in.
And a lot of times, right, see, these terms are really easily thrown around, right? A lot of people will just look at Instagram posts or reels and be like, oh, I have ADHD. No, unless you have been certified by a psychiatrist or a psychologist that you have ADHD, you don't have it. We can't accept that unless it's been diagnosed.
Very important message, especially for
I would
say that again. I think it's very important.
So I really encourage people to not self-diagnose themselves or not label themselves. There's no need to label yourself, right? Think of it as okay. And the beautiful thing is, see, ADHD in general will have many meanings. You go to 10 different psychologists, they'll tell you 10 different things. You go to 10 different people and what do you mean by ADHD? They'll all give you their own definition of it, right? Because ADHD is a noun that doesn't really have meaning. So when I talk to users, I ask them, can you convert this into a verb form? What do you mean when you think you have ADHD? So then they'll be saying, okay, I am not able to focus for more than 5 minutes. Now I can solve it. If you tell me I have ADHD, I don't know what you mean. And a very simple exercise, right? This is very interesting. So think of coffee. What are the 3 words that come to your mind when you thought of coffee?
Black, hot, reheating.
Okay, you.
Smell, aroma, the color of the coffee.
Okay, I'll think of Starbucks, black, Arabica. So you get it? It was one noun, but all of us have different meaning attached to it. It could be because of your experience. It could be because of what memories you brought in, right? It's the same with ADHD. Or all of these terms like depression, or if I talk about OCD. So for every user, it's very necessary to first convert your nouns or your adjectives into a verb form. You give me 5-6 sentences about what you are going through. Once you say that, now I can convert these sentences into solutions. So when I talk about perfectionism, my perfectionism could be, it's not the same as what your perfectionism could be, right? For me,
I have a statement here. So, to anyone who was listening just now, you must have heard her mention 6 types of procrastination. And good chance, as soon as she said it, some of you thought, oh, that's me, oh, that's me. Maybe you apply what she just said, and instead of thinking, oh, that's me, verbalize it. Okay, I think I'm perfectionist because I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. Then log into artclub.org and actually ask her that question. I think that's pretty good advice. Always try to verbalize your opinion about yourself. That's better than having a label which you would not agree with.
It's the same thing when we talk about lazy, right? What is lazy for you is very different than what's lazy for me versus what's lazy for him. And to be specific, not verbalize.
Lazy, but anyway.
See, he's already done it.
He's already done.
So I'm saying even verbalize specific to write it in action verb form.
Example, action. So
okay, lazy, right? I feel I'm lazy because I don't clean my kitchen every day. I feel I'm lazy because I lie around in bed for 1 hour. I feel I'm lazy because my parents tell me I'm lazy. So you get it, now you've converted it and then you can solve it.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't clean a kitchen, but at the same time I work 12 hours. So am I really lazy? Right? I work 12 hours consistently with my laptop. So you're not lazy. We'll find out what's happening here, but you're not lazy as a person. Or if you talk about, okay, your parents have told you are lazy, but maybe it's not important for you to clean your room. So then, maybe not a priority. So this is non-verbal.
Off camera, if you remember, we were talking about me going to organizations and giving talks. And we were discussing it's not original content and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you right now, I'm going to speak about globalization in my credit. But I'm
do that.
This is very powerful.
It's very powerful.
There is so much you can do with this.
Yes.
One of the few things, the only thing I do for mental health is journaling. I journal I journal like I think I gave talks on journaling also.
Okay.
So in journaling, one of the things I didn't realize I was doing it, but this is something we do it when we write a journal, is I had a good day today because these particular things happened, or I had a bad day today because this particular thing happened. I didn't really like what this person did. Why? Because I think this is similar to what happened in the past, and I'm writing it out, and now I have an action plan going forward. So I like this verbalizing things quite powerful.
Yeah, and the other thing is it gives you that accountability and ownership, right? Because till then you feel helpless. I'm sad, I can't do anything about my sadness. The moment you write, why you are sad, what's happening, you're like, oh, these 3 things I can solve, maybe these 2 I can't. So now you don't feel helpless, and you're not in a position where you're putting it on others, or you're blaming somebody else, because you're like, oh, this is in my hand.
Let's just keep talking with each other, because while I'm talking to you, I can see Margaret.
I'm sure you want to,
I know
yeah.
he loves, writing things on verbal.
Yeah.
Sometimes people verbalize in their mind, right?
You shouldn't. You should never do
So they can, maybe it's up to them.
Never do it.
I just want to have a case, you were talking about ADHD, you mentioned OCD, a question on this. So, people consider OCD a medical condition, a condition, not medical condition, comes under mental health. I got a friend who, he tells me he's OCD, room is spick and span. Every time he goes spick and span, he likes it. He's organized his whole life around the fact that he needs to do this, and very organized, super organized. Not you. Not you. We can just look around. Right? Super organized. And he's learned to deal with it. Now tell me, why do some people, and when I speak to him, sometimes he says, I have OCD, I need to get this done.
You've been diagnosed with it?
No, he's not, but he tells me, and his lifestyle reflects that. His lifestyle. Now I have 2 questions. He's not diagnosed himself. He's worked around it. I would say that he's adjusted his life around his lifestyle. And it's kind of, wait, it's not me. I don't. Just his lifestyle. It seems like he's doing well. So my question is, why do you consider that a problem? If you're looking at it from mental health, if somebody has OCD, is it a problem? Is it a genuine problem?
So, okay, again, coming back to what we were discussing before, right? There's we call it a presupposition of sorts, which is if something is not broken, you don't have to fix it. Now, if a user comes to me and says, I have OCD and it's affecting me badly all the time, right? Then we'll work on it. If a person says, I have OCD but I love it, it makes my life better, great, then you don't need to solve it. And that's a premise, right? Even there might be people who will be, okay, I don't want to study this subject, although everybody around me is telling me to. So this is not important to me, right? And that's why I'm putting it off. So I won't solve it. Versus the person coming and telling me, hey, you know what? I want to do an MBA. For that, I need to give a GMAT, but I'm unable to study for it. I've been trying, I'm unable to do it. So I need help. That's when you help. You don't go around telling people, oh, this is a problem. If you as a user feel it's a problem, you come to me and then we'll solve it. This is something you had also mentioned, right? If you feel there's an aspect of your life where you're like, okay, this is not working. So, and how can you identify that? You'll feel it, right? You'll feel uncomfortable in situations, or you'll feel you're unhappy with what's happening. Or let's say that, so there are some, I'll keep giving user examples. There are people who find having difficult conversations or confrontation very difficult. So they'll put it off for ages. So we were talking to the user, so they're procrastinating that. Okay, I need to have this conversation with my boss. I've put it for a long time. I need to have this conversation with my wife, with my family. I always put it off. And they're like, and does it bother you? Right? Or how frequently does this happen? Yeah, it happens every week and it bothers me. So there we identify, yeah, it's bothering the user. So yes, then it's a problem. It's not me. It's not I'm not present here. It's you as a user. If you believe it's a problem, then yes, we can solve it. And that's a very basic premise on mental health that not very many people are aware of, right?
Yeah.
Because they believe that, oh, somebody else is going to decide that for me, which is not a therapist's job. A therapist's job is never to take decisions on behalf of the user. It's never to tell them, oh, you know what, this is a problem. No, the user will come to you, they should talk, and then from your knowledge of psychology, theoretical and practical, then you enable them. Like you will give them, think of it as, you will give them tools, you will give them techniques after the person has come to you with a problem, and then you help them solve it. But the final decision, choice will always rest with the user. Even in procrastination, after if a person feels that, okay, now I've solved it, then we won't continue working on it. Then they come up with the next one. So this is what our users have done. Maybe they started off with exercise, they're like, now I'm happy with where I am, let's go to nutrition. Okay, then we started working on nutrition. Then the person said, okay, this month I'm going on a holiday, so I don't want to work on it. Okay, great. I'm not going to convince you to do that, right? Stay on a holiday. After the holiday, they came back, then they started working again. This is something that we have to understand. I feel this is not just about my startup, but it's a lot of time that we do this in the rest of life also in organizations. That we keep pushing people, overselling when it's not needed. If a person wants it, they will come. right? You have to make it comfortable enough for them to come when they need to. And that's something we believe in APA. It's like we'll help you overcome your procrastination when you want it, the way that works for you. So that's
I think this is a great place to stop here.
Yeah, in fact, it is such a great place to stop. I feel I don't need help anymore. I feel
you need a lot of help.
as easy as
I do not have to ensure that you get help. Please log into our club.
I will log with Papa anyway to see what it's about, but I'm quite convinced I do.
I love it. Thank
Exactly.
you so much, Rucha,
Yeah.
for joining us
Yeah.
on the podcast. It
Yeah.
was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah.
Shame on you for asking me who is Rucha and why we inviting her to the podcast. Shame on you. Can you not see what a
It's
fantastic
great having you,
Thank
Rucha.
you.
I don't know what he's talking about.
We will keep having you on. I think there is way too much we've not discussed.
Yeah.
We've not touched on. You said you wanted to do nutrition, and we've not touched on that at all.
I said my users want to do
We
nutrition.
can do the thing that most of our users want to know. Your biological clock is ticking. When will you?
Does the user want that?
I don't think he is interested in biological
It
flow.
was a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much for gracing our show today. That's it, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, great.
Great.